Afternoon, welcome back to the channel. I've got a fun little workup for you today. We're going to be doing some true metal metallics, but with a nice little twist to it. We'll be using Necron Lord's Power Blade for this demonstration, but it doesn't have to be confined just to power blades. I've used it, same workup, on armor as well, where it comes out really nicely, especially for Cyberpunk. You can see here on Nephany from Judgment, I did all of her armor, exactly the same workup. So we preserve the lovely sheen of a metallic, but giving it a nice different coloured twist. So we can still push our contrasts really, really well from dark out to the very, very shiny light. But rather than doing it with non-metal metallics, we're going to be doing true metallics. So we're going to use a couple of different paints. We're going to start with something from Darkstar. Blue steel, it's really, really dark metallic. Then we'll move up to Graphite. Then on to Pewter, all from Darkstar. And then for our final little highlights, we're going to use some Chrome from Vallejo Model Metallic Air. For our tint, we're going to use my one and only Citadel color contrast, Terradon Turquoise, and a little bit of the contrast medium to thin it down. Now, as we're going to be pushing the metallics through an airbrush, we want to thin them down a bit. I'm using Darkstar's own metal thinner, which goes really, really well with their metallics. We will be using an airbrush. Now, you can technically do this with hairy brush, but for a really super smooth effect, I'm going to go with the airbrush today. So we start off, I've already primed the blade, just with some Style and Res Black, and we're going to pop some of the blue steel and some of the metallic thinner into the airbrush. Give it a shaky shake first. And for the base coat, I'm just going to use my Infinity with the 0.4 needle. Metallics are a little different when they go through the airbrush than non-metallic colors, so we want to go in nice and soft and easily, as light as possible, so they won't bunch up or they won't overflow. We'll just speed it up a bit here while we get the base coat down. Again, as I airbrush the base coat on, I keep it moving the whole time. Don't remain in any one area, otherwise you'll get pooling. And give it two nice light thin coats. So we've got our base metallic down. It's a really nice dark metal. We can see the center of the blade has got an apex to it, so we're going to be using that apex to get our highlights and shadows. Now we could use some masking tape, but I'm going to make a little thumb mask. Dead easy to use, much more convenient than having to mask everything off. So I get two pieces of plastic card. Just make sure they're nice and keen. And then when you get some hot glue, just put an little squirt right along the edge of one of them. Don't go mad with it, because we don't want too much hot glue here. We just want enough, which we're going to make a little bit of a kind of a rubber seal for the mask. So we got a little bit of hot glue down. Take another piece of plastic card and just squeeze them together. And again, try and keep the edges keen. Now with the hot glue dry and cooled down, you can see we have a whole pile of glue squirted out at the end, so that's not a problem. We just need to cut that off. So to make sure I don't cut into the actual plastic, I'm going to use a metal ruler and then just take a nice sharp craft knife and cut off that excess glue. And flip her over to the other side and do it again. It's a little bit uneven, not a problem. Just take a sanding block. I just use the multi-sided nail file things you can get from Boots or wherever, and just smooth it down. With that done, just pull the two pieces of plastic card apart carefully. You want the glue to stick to one side of the plastic card. Off she comes. And we've got a nice little rubber seal on the edge of the plastic card. We'll just trim that down a little bit so it's a bit more manageable. Now you can get a bit of masking tape out. I just use sometimes a little bit of masking tape to fix it to my thumb. It's just a little bit easier. Make sure the hot glue side, the rubber seal, is on the other side of your thumb. Otherwise it isn't going to mask anything. There we go. Very simple thumb mask. Much kind of easier and more flexible than having to put masking tape all over the place. So if we put it up onto our blade, we can see we can now mask off the two sides of the blade, and that little bit of hot glue will make sure you don't get any bleed through when you start airbrushing again. So that's all done. We've got the airbrush loaded up first of all with graphite, and we're going to do a very simple two spot on one side of the blade and one spot on the bottom side of the blade. Very much kind of like how you'd plan out doing in non-metal metallic power sword workup. So just go easily. Again, metallics through an airbrush can be a little bit, they can be a wee bit contrary at times. So little, small, short, gentle pumps. With that done, flip her around, make sure the metallics are dry, and we'll do the bottom of the blade. And again, here on the bottom, we're going to focus just in the center of the blade. On the top of the blade, we went on the two outsides. Here it's going to be in the very center. So we'll have opposing highlights. Again, go easy. Don't remain in one place too long because it'll start to pull. And again, the rubber from the hot glue, or the rubber seal, the hot glue, will make sure it doesn't bleed through. After graphite, we're going to go to pewter. And again, we're going to hit the same areas, except this time we're not going to hit as much. We're going to kind of retreat a little bit each time. Keep it nice and smooth and build up those highlights. You can do this with hairy brush, but you just get a much softer, smoother transition if you use the airbrush. I'm using an Infinity CR Plus, and I think, what I set the compressor to, 30. I normally have it just set to 30 psi, and then do most of the control of the pressure through the trigger. Again, with the pewter, you can see where hot spots are starting to line up. I like to dry each layer with a hairdryer before turning it over, remasking, and onto again. We're building up a brighter hot spot on in the middle of the bottom side of the blade. And we smack it with a bit of the hairdryer, flip her over, and onto our final highlight. This is Model Air Chrome from Vallejo. It's the shiniest of the shinies, and it's perfect for our final highlight. Just get those really, it's essentially, we're using this essentially as how we'd use white if we were doing a non-metal metallic workup. So we just hit those edges, and with that done, we're going to go into our hairy brush and we're just going to pick the very, very edges to give them a little more highlight. So you can see we're just going to the edges of the blade, anywhere where the light is going to catch and reflect back, give it another little touch. So still using our chrome, we just want to catch any of those hard little edges that the light is going to reflect on. Now with our edge highlights finally done and all our true metallics in place, our darker metallics, our bright silvers, it's time to have a little fun. We've got Terradon Turquoise from Citadel, one of the contrast paints, and the medium. I'm going to load up the airbrush, 2 parts medium and 1 part contrast paint. And we're going to use this through the airbrush as a glaze. When we're glazing, we want to do it very, very, very softly. Just putting down a very light bit of glaze, letting it dry and moving on. Don't flood the area, don't try and over glaze. It's not a wash. You don't slop it on in buckets. Just very gently through the airbrush. Control the pressure. Make sure that you're not blasting the hell out of the thing. Just really soft. Build up the color. And again, we want to build the color up more in the darker areas of metallic and just give a very, very thin, light covering in the brighter areas of the metallic. So we're going to increase our contrast with the glaze as well as tinting the overall color. Again, keep it moving. Use the airbrush in one area, move on, and you can come back later because it will dry pretty quickly. And once I've got one full layer of glaze down, I normally hit it with a hairdryer. Make sure it's totally dry and then go back in again. Very, very lightly on the brightest parts of the blade and then a little more heavily to increase the contrast in the darker metallics. And then one fine little layer, pushing the glaze just really onto the darkest parts to really push that contrast. Give us nice dark depths in the blade while keeping the shiny bright sparks up on the edges. With all dry, we went back a little bit of chrome just to pick out some little highlights on the edges of the blade and the edges of some of the details. And then finally, we just added a little bit extra detail, some red ink to pick out the kind of the energy circuits, a little bit of pale gold to offset the green. And that is our blade pretty much done. Nice and simple. We'll be continuing with this model, and next time I think we're going to do some marble work for his carapace. Hope you enjoyed the video. It's a very, very simple workup. As ever, any questions or comments? And please do, if you enjoy the video, click subscribe, ding the old bell, and I'll see you for the next one. Cheers muchly.